Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hey, family. We are here with the key master, unlockastrology.com, Samuel Reynolds. Hi, sir. Okay. Chest pop. All right. So today we're having a conversation as we get prepared for lesson 5 in narrative. So if you haven't joined narrative, go join narrative with the K.com. We were talking off mic about Planned Parenthood and what's happening with Roe v. Wade, and on the heels of the Texas legislators passing the law that pretty much makes it illegal to have an abortion after 6 weeks, when most women may not even know that they're pregnant, and deputizes regular folk to file lawsuits against anyone aiding and abetting a person, a woman, having an abortion. And you said, I'm like, you were telling me that there's a chart or something that you had done.
Yeah, so there's a chart, and one of the things that I had started off with my assistant doing some research for a presentation on Planned Parenthood, we came across some interesting facts that I am looking forward to sharing. So let me just get my my screen. Okay. And so what people are looking at in the center, well, let me reverse it. In the outer wheel, that's what I want. Okay, in the center is Margaret Sanger's first clinic. And
now, for people who aren't familiar with who Margaret Sanger and I just had this conversation with Dr. Carr last week about Margaret Sanger and her eugenics movement, and people, Black people in particular, are very like, oh, this is the way that they're going to get rid of us and blah, blah, blah. And she's a complicated figure for sure, not a friend. But tell us a little bit about Margaret Sanger.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on some of the key things of it. She was a eugenicist. She was part of that. And the outgrowth of many of her ideas is what we have now as Planned Parenthood. And of course, there's different particular developments related to, abortion in America. And also, since we're speaking to us, we're longer range. I mean, in many ways, we're progressive, but we're also conservative people, which I also relate to. Now, what does that mean practically? I am pro-choice, but I'm also affirmative of life. So if I'm talking to a friend who's faced with the prospect of a pregnancy, then I am going to encourage more toward having the baby. But if that person chooses not to have the baby, I also will respect that choice and support that choice, because it is their choice. So that's what I mean. And what I got intrigued is there some astrology that we can look at. And what I'm showing you is just some of the nub of my research that I conducted with my assistant, who is a woman. And we were both interested, like, well, what can we expect with Roe versus Wade? Are we going to be able to keep it? And when we saw this, and this was maybe 2-3 months back, when we looked at these charts, it was like, oh, I'm just going to tell you, Roe versus Wade is in trouble.
Okay, well, so pause before you go into that, because I just want to give a little history. Margaret Sanger, born September 14th, makes her a Virgo. Margaret Louise Higgins, she was born in Corning, New York. She actually died a Virgo, September 6, 1966, in Tucson, Arizona, ironically.
Not too far from me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so I pointed over there. Her parents were Irish Catholic, but free thinking. By the end of his life, her father, Michael, became an atheist, which I find interesting. He was also an activist for women's suffrage and proponent for free education in America. She married, she had a couple of kids, but then she started this birth control movement in this country. The American Birth Control League was an organization that she founded, which basically was targeting middle-class white women, which is interesting. But then she worked with Black folk, Black leaders and professionals who saw a need for birth control in their communities in 1929. A Black social worker named James Hubert, leader in New York's Urban League, asked Sanger to open a clinic in Harlem. So a lot of, we think about the nefarious ways in which people move in the world. But W.E.B. Du Bois actually served on her clinic in Harlem. So there's an interesting, and I don't know, are they traitors to us, or are they looking at ways to improve the quality of life? And let me just be honest, Black folk in classism spaces and colorism spaces probably feel that there are certain Black people that probably shouldn't procreate. And I'm thinking that that was the way that was and how they connected. Interesting though.
I mean, I'm glad you chimed in with that. I mean, W.E.B. Du Bois, who I've given a presentation on, and maybe I should do that either through narrative or would do that coming back to Sundays. He was a very complicated man. What's interesting about him, not just his astrology, Pisces, is that, he evolved over time, and some measure of his evolution comes more in alignment with what you and I talk about now. But he wasn't starting there. He didn't start there for sure, didn't end there. So for instance, there's enough historical evidence that he probably contributed to the ruin of Marcus Garvey in this country.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. But what's ironic is that as much as he dogged Garvey, who ended up with his dying breath in Africa?
Come on. So
W.E.B. Du Bois, right?
Can we pause on that for a second? Because again, in Class with Carr, we talk about this quite frequently, how the social structure will freeze people in a moment of time that's convenient for them, right? And then kind of turn them into avatars. When all of us are evolving human beings, I am not, my brother treats me the way I was when I was 16. In his mind, I'm still 16-year-old Karen, who was wildly immature and ridiculous in ways that today I'm not, and hopefully those of you listening, we're going to constantly grow, challenge ourselves, evolve, come to some realizations, think differently. I'm different than I was last year in terms of the things that I think about and how I think about them and the way that I move in the world. And why wouldn't we expect that of the people? I mean, how old was he? 90 something years old when he passed?
Yes.
I would think that, 40, 30 something W.B. Du Bois is vastly different than 90 something, 80 something W.B. Du Bois. And I'm sure he felt bad about what he did to Marcus Garvey, maybe, because he did take his last breaths in Ghana. Ironic.
Right. Yeah. I mean, 33, 34-year-old Dr. King, that people love to cite the 1963 speech on the day that actually W.E.B. Du Bois died. That's when it was given. People love to cite that speech, but not think about the 1968 39-year-old Dr. King, who was not the same and didn't espouse all the same principles. So people love well, I just want to, be colorblind like Dr. King. Which Dr. King are you talking about? And are you understanding the Dr. King from 1963 even? Because I don't think that was necessarily a colorblind Dr. King.
No, and who feared he had integrated his people into a burning house and was, very, maybe he and Malcolm were coming closer and closer. I mean, Malcolm, I love that we're having these conversations because
they both died at 39.
How weird is that?
It is. Because a teacher told me years ago, now he said it in a very particular way related to men, but he said men really don't reach a level of maturity until 40, which is interesting. I don't know if that's always true. It's not mostly true, but that's what he said. It's interesting because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he received the Quran or began reading or the recitations of the Quran at 40. But both of these salient men, Dr. King and Malcolm X, died before they could take their 40th year of life. So, I mean, and when you think about it, especially for me as a 53-year-old man, they were so young, right? They hadn't even gotten into the full fruition of their adulthood. And when I think he also got one of my mentors got that idea about maturity, because it used to be in early academia, you couldn't do your PhD before you were 40. And also, this is true for those who want to study the Kabbalah in certain Jewish traditions. Mostly as a man, you couldn't start studying the Kabbalah until you were 40. So when we think about so many of our young, leaders, dying or getting, trailed off, whether we're talking about Huey P. Newton, I don't know how old he was when he got strung out on drugs, but chances are it probably was around that time. I mean, that could be a whole different talk about the astrology related to aging. You know, I have done since 2009, I've done consistent research. I even have a report on my website on Jupiter returns, which happen every 12 years. How that report started is Amadou Diallo and Sean Bell. I realized when Sean Bell was killed that they both died at 23. And I was like, what the hell happens at 23? You know, astrologically, why would that be a salient thing? And then I went down this rabbit hole and discovering that there are very important things that one should manage and understand at 23 years old, going on 24.
You got
related to that Jupiter return.
You got Notorious B.I.G. 24. You have Tupac. Tupac didn't make it out of how old was he? How old was Tupac? Tupac was 25. Fred Hampton, 21. You know, Huey P. Newton made it to 47. But I imagine
he made it to 47 before he died. But how about before? That was the fourth Jupiter return, by the way. How about before he was strung out?
See, that's what I was going to say. When people start using drugs is when their age stunts, right? I read that somewhere. Like whatever age you are when you're strung out is kind of the age that you get frozen into.
Wow.
So I read that somewhere. Let me see, when did he get strung out on drugs? He died at 47 in Oakland, California, August 22nd. Let me see. He visited China in 1970. What? Jim Jones.
They may not have it in there, but I mean, I know if he died at 47, and what year was that?
47, 1989. So.
Well, I'm sure he was on it before that, because I think Bobby Seale talked about it, you know, because Bobby Seale was in our department in African American Studies at Temple University.
Wow.
When I got there. And I used to clown him. And, you know, Bobby, if you're listening, you look at this, I'm saying I'm sorry. I am sorry. I used to clown him because he came out with a book at the time, you know, on, you know, barbecue. And I used to, you know, joke, not to his face, but I used to joke with my colleagues. It was like, he went from talking about killing the pig in the 60s to cooking the pig in the 80s. What's that about, right? But when he talked about seizing the time, you know, in terms of his book, and he gave a reading at Robin's bookstore in Philadelphia, he humbled me. He didn't say it to me, but he said, you know, one day I woke up and I realized I had to take care of my children, right? And I was like, you know what, that's real. He wrote a book, maybe he was hoping that it would do some sales and, you know, have extra money for his kids to go to college or whatever. And here I'm clowning it. Who am I? You know?
You're a young person without a fully formed perspective on life, and you've evolved, which is what, fortunately, you know, you live long enough to do that.
That's what my grandmother used to say, just live long enough.
So here we are. All right.
So yeah, we went on a whole different tangent. People like, I just want to know about, okay.
Do they really? Or do they like these breadcrumbs?
Maybe they do. I hope so. Y'all let us know. You put it in the chat, you know, maybe, you know, because some people are like, maybe the Virgos, just stay focused. But, you know, sometimes it's important to kind of get these different details. So what you're looking at in the center is the chart for Margaret Sanger's first clinic. Now, we have to give full admission to at least one key thing. We know the date that she started her clinic. We know the place. It was in Brownsville, New York, and Brooklyn. The time we're conjecturing because it's roughly the time that we found in a news report that specifies that's when the clinic opened. So we're using that as 10 a.m. So this is the chart. What you're looking at is it's a Sag rising chart. Moon is in Gemini, right? And the sun is in Libra. What you're looking at in this outer wheel here is similarly, same time, when Roe versus Wade was announced and that women were given the right to their reproductive rights with having children, specifically in terms of terminating a pregnancy within a certain time frame. What I want people to pay attention to, what we found in looking at some of the general history of challenges and issues related to Planned Parenthood, is this particular planet gets activated. Saturn which was at 29 degrees of Cancer. What we have found is that as a planet approaches that degree in that planet in the Sanger chart, the first clinic chart, Mercury you see here, the sun is also, there's usually some challenges, disruptions that will come up related to Planned Parenthood. And then of course, in general, in this country, reproductive rights. Now, I'm going to show you the transits right now. Well, let me go to a different chart and I'll show you the transits roughly for today. Now it's for Santa Fe, and I'll show it to you in a different kind of chart so that it's more visible or better visible. Do you see where it says transit September 5th, 2021? Does that say that up there or no? I might have to do a new share. I probably do have to do a new share, sorry. All right, this is what it should say. All right, so it says transit September 5th, 2021.
Yes.
You might remember I said, watch out for, that degree. Now, the other degree that was also highlighted for the Sanger chart is 24 degrees Capricorn. Where is Pluto, the planet I've been talking about, at 24 degrees of Capricorn? In February, it gets to about 27 degrees, then it gets to about 28. So what we can expect in early 2022 is yet perhaps another challenge or set of challenges related to Roe versus Wade, and specifically related to reproductive rights in this country. Texas, just to be clear, so on what I'm saying, Texas is just the beginning. So just know that the Lone Star State, people are thinking like, well, maybe we can just keep it contained to Texas. You are not. It won't. It's a matter before it starts. Now, what that may mean, those activists who are about reproductive rights or throwing more money, at different causes to kind of advance it, or getting more strategic with lobbyists, however you want to do it, however we want to do it and think about it, it's now. Because as that Pluto gets to 29 degrees over, the next 2 years, and then even going into Aquarius, which also goes back to this chart, I think it's sharing it. It should say, do you see two charts, Karen? Or just one?
What, two charts, one inside of the other?
Yeah, do you see that now?
I see inner circle, outer circle. Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, I flipped it. Again, 24 degrees is what we're looking at for the first Sanger chart, which where Pluto is right now. And then as it's going toward opposite to that Saturn, we're talking about some possible restructuring related to the law. Again, I'm giving my opinion, which is not astrological, right? But my opinion, I think the law has been fine as it is in terms of a woman's right to choose. But when you see Pluto and Saturn, whether you're talking about an individual, a country, when you see an opposition, there's some deep restructuring that's happening, some deep changes. And now you may say like, well, then that's just fail complete. That's fated, right? That's just what's going to happen. That doesn't have to be the way it has to go. What we could talk about is restructuring where it becomes more still in the benefit for women, not against them. Maybe at, instead of 6 weeks, it can be extended to, 9, 12, whatever. I mean, I don't know if that becomes a suitable compromise. I'm not trying to speak for women. I'm not qualified. But what I could say is that there is some way in which the law is going to change. And we just hope it's not destroyed.
So, Samuel Reynolds, this is, we call this a settler colony, right? Or this criminal enterprise called America, stitched together by these laws that foundationally are rooted in keeping Black folk oppressed and in bondage. All of the laws, right?
Or people of color, because Native Americans experience it too.
I call them Black people because white's a construct. So if you're not white, you're Black. Let's
Fair.
stop with their damn ways in which they divide us. No, they don't divide themselves. And I'm talking about the power structure in this world. So we're not dividing. If you're not white, you're Black. So stop.
Okay.
If you're not doing the Black thing, then you are playing right into their hands to diminish your own power.
Fair.
Most of the world, if you're not white, is Black. So it behooves us to figure out, and I'm sorry, I just have to say this, to figure out how to meet and match that power. And the only way we can do that is with numbers. And by all of us collectively understanding that white's a made up construct. So therefore, it behooves you, if you're not white, to be black. I don't even get how folk contort themselves to want to get into a power structure that they'll never, ever be a part of, just to get some proximity to it so they can get what, an extra piece of biscuit, or extra piece of the entrails. What do you think you're getting with your placating this made-up construct called whiteness? What are you actually achieving? Maybe your group gets a little bit more, but you don't have freedom of power. We need to all right, I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. You didn't do anything wrong. I mean, I think, this is what we're talking about. One of the boons of astrology is that it gives us some measure of insight and foresight. And, again, when my assistant and I looked at these charts, about 2-3 months ago, we were like, oh, well, damn, because we could track the movement of Pluto in terms of what's happening. We also can know what's happening as soon as Jupiter is going to go also into Aries and then Taurus, for the Jupiter return for that first chart. It's going to be a trying time.
So I brought it up to ask this question. States' rights are still, so that's the little trick that kept Black folk enslaved, right? The states' rights.
Federalism.
States, we have the rights, so we're going to do this Missouri Compromise. We're going to do all of these compromises so that the folk that wanted to own people got to continue to do that. But then Industrial Revolution was like, well, that's not good for all of us, so we're going to have to go to war over this, not over the Black folk being in bondage, because we just want to ship them to Liberia and get them the hell up out of here. But we're here now, right? So even this, folk are like, there's some Black folk who's like, good, there shouldn't be any abortion. I should have a right to if I'm the father, to be blah, blah, blah. Then you carry the baby for 9 months and push it out of your ass. And that's great. Do that. And again, I'm somebody who have never had an abortion and would never have an abortion. But I know that this is a power game right now. And
I think it's deeper than that. It's not just a power game. If you look at the whole GOP platform, everything from talking about gay rights and LGBTQ IA stuff to this in terms of reproductive rights to who it's about who gets in this country, everything is trying to preserve whiteness. That is the key aspect. It's like, it's almost white people saying to other white people and the larger world, we're dying, y'all. We're not reproducing fast enough, so we need to slow this roll by any means necessary.
Which is why people at the border are being sterilized, which is why they sterilize Native Americans, and which is why they sterilize the people who spoke Spanish coming here, which is why they sterilize Black folk as well during, after bondage, of course, because you needed them during bondage, you needed to breed and have as many as possible. This is, okay. So if this is about holding on to something that doesn't exist anyway, So my question to you is, we've done great migrations before. There are states in this union where you can, you'll still be able to get, an abortion legally. Definitely New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, certain places, definitely in the Northeast. Beyond that, your thoughts on what's the fallout from this? Are people is there a mass exodus from Texas, or are folks gonna double down and vote in Texas? Because that's the other power that you have, but they've gerrymandered the hell out of that state to make sure that minority rule is a thing, because it's what it is now. Thoughts on that?
I'm left with an overall question related to some things that are happening astrologically. I've talked about the Pluto return, and I've talked about it specifically in return to the police. But one of the things I've also mentioned is that this particular planet, Uranus, right now is in Taurus over here. When it goes into Gemini, what I mentioned before is that the United States has never not been at war when Uranus is in Gemini in its history. And the question I have is whether we are at war with a foreign power or with ourselves. Because one of the times when Uranus was in Gemini, it was the Civil War. And what we are seeing and have seen even a little bit before Trump, I mean, I think the earliest, clearest sign of it was in 2008 with the emergence of the Tea Party. We're seeing a bifurcation and an ossification related to almost two or multiple Americas. And, you know, this is as much as we want to talk about it related to states' rights, we're seeing a preponderance of issues even between states wanting to join together that smacks of like Confederacy. And I would also say of sedition. So I think that's among the deeper issues that we're dealing with in this country. So right now it's kind of dealing with Texas, and yeah, we can talk about particular states that become safer, which is still true. It's true even in terms of this age of COVID. There's some states that are managing the whole pandemic better or have been for different periods. And there's just some that are like off the rails.
Right. Okay. So you just put some stink in the room right now with America has never not been at war when Uranus
is in Gemini.
Uranus was in Gemini, which is when does that happen? So
that's going to be probably within the next so when Uranus went into Taurus, into Taurus in 2018, so sometime around 2025.
Okay. All right, y'all. So, and this would be the perfect distraction. I don't want to say 9/11, which we just experienced, the 20th anniversary of. I don't want to bring that up, but as distractions from what's happening, how does this play out? And then what, because again, like you said, Texas is a red herring. It's not even a red herring. It's like maybe a contraction of something that's given birth. It's not the thing, though. It's not even the worst thing that's coming. So,
and the Supreme Court has been playing this interesting game that, some friends of mine, some of them legal eagles themselves, and some of them, just regular observers of the law, they kind of say no to some things that the conservative party or conservative parties, are like, yo, you should be on this. They're like, yeah, nah. So we've looked at that as like, oh, they're saving their chips for a bigger haul, or they're looking for a bigger fish. And one of the biggest fish that the conservative party has been looking for since 1973 is Roe versus Wade. So that whole pass from the Supreme Court and even a hearing about Texas, that was on purpose.
Right. So we give them that, I want to talk a little strategy. I know you're an astrologist, but I need us to talk a little strategy. Maybe we don't do it here, but all right. So we got maybe 2 to 3 years, but the 2 to 3 years, by the time the third year, but by the time that Uranus hits into Gemini, it's too late. It's done already. And I'm not sure if we prevent it from happening as much as we figure out, because in wartime, there's always opportunity. Somebody's going to benefit. Hell, the richest got richer during a damn pandemic. The richest 1% in this country, 10 times their wealth during a pandemic.
Yeah.
So I need us to be prepared to capitalize. We're not going to stop this thing. This has been a runaway train, I believe, since maybe 1619, maybe before. Maybe we've been on a collision course, and we've had a couple of horrific things happen, because Civil War, more people died in that than I think World War II and one combined, Americans. This is going to be interesting. I don't think America's going to survive it either. So, as we know,
maybe not America as we know it.
Yeah, as we know. I had the caveat. But what's
which may not be a bad thing, like you said. I mean, I think I'll tell you, even though, like I said, I have a question, which war is it? Sometimes my spirit says we may, and this would be a fault of America. America might be dumb enough to do this, depending what kind of president we have. We might end up fighting a war on two fronts, dealing with internal conflict, and then what also may be happening or flaring up in other parts of the world. One of the things that if you look back, because Uranus takes 84 years to get through the zodiac. If you go back 83, 84 years when Uranus was last in Taurus, I call it a time of tectonic shift and things kind of, moving and changing form subtly, just like how we talk about platonic plates, or not platonic plates, tectonic plates, shifting and moving, and we can't always perceive it. This is what's happening right now. And so some of the shifts that are happening are somewhat subtle, but at the same time, we don't realize the magnitude of them. Like, the Taliban coming back into Afghanistan, right? Or then, in terms of what's happened in Syria, and then how even Arabia, Saudi Arabia making peace to some degree with some other nation states that have been at war with Israel, right? So what we're looking at are some real shifts. And I have to believe that what may emerge, and I've been talking about this for a while, what may emerge sometime mid-decade is a possible war with Iran, right? And, Iran becomes a centerpiece related to it. And I'm not advocating a war with Iran. I'm not anti-Iran. I was married to someone of Persian descent, so it would be dumb. But why I think that's a centerpiece is because it's the centerpiece of the Shia, movement and history. And so what's this got to do with the United States? Well, if there is a run on Iran and the United States is involved, then it's going to draw in the countries that have been somewhat quietly supportive of Iran, which has been Russia and China. So, this is not just a simple matter of like, well, it's just the Middle East. If stuff jumps off and there's enough at stake, and the United States, again, as it's usually, per its usual, gets involved, it will kind of stretch it because, the United States has a lot to focus on at home.
But if we're talking the Vietnam War, it had domestic issues when it started that. So America, you said it's dumb enough. America's always dumb enough to think it is arrogance more than stupidity. It's like,
arrogance is a kind of stupidity, actually.
We can do all of these things, and we didn't win Vietnam. When I say we, who is we? Man, even my language has to change because I'm not.
The United States government did not win Vietnam.
Did not, because it was fighting two fronts, and I think this front's worse. Because
it will be.
It's worse globally too, because now you got superpowers with weaponry that have been setting up, and China has a 10,000-year plan. It has a 100-year plan. Like China's planning wise and patience been waiting for this.
So like I told you in one of our sessions, United States is playing checkers and China's playing Go.
Yeah.
They're playing their game.
So I'm like looking at my map that's on my desk, like where, like there's like places in the world, like I want to say Switzerland and Bermuda, where nuclear bombs aren't going to touch when they start hitting each other. It's like certain places in the world that because they need the banks to still be operating.
And just to bring it home,
where are we going?
It's still like in terms of, let's talk about Afghanistan. The Taliban literally just said maybe 2 days ago, our newest best ally is China. They didn't ask the Chinese embassy to empty out. The Chinese were chilling, having tea. They're like, oh, cha, let's go. They're going to be there. And Afghanistan is important. I'm not justifying having ever been there, but Afghanistan is important as a portal between Pakistan and also in terms of other parts, and even toward Iran, because Afghanistan was part of the Persian Empire at one point too. Even many Afghanis speak a permutation of Farsi.
So while stupid Americans fighting over the border wall and wearing a mask and whether or not to get a vaccine, the rest of the world is coming together like Voltron. And we're not ready. We're not ready because we're not even, trying to figure out, and when it hits, we're just going to be scrambling for survival. So I'm like, let's have a little foresight for once, folk who are watching, and gird your loins. Now, I'm not going based on the charts. So let me just say the reason why I'm so passionate about it, because I've known this in my spirit. I ain't have to look at your charts to know what you're saying is absolutely. I've been talking about this for the last decade, and now it's here. And it's like, you feel like the town crier, like hey, this is about to happen, y'all. Let's get your money together. Make sure you are able to make sure you have your passports, make sure that your health is right, because when it comes, you don't want to be infirmed. You don't want to be limping. I'm taking care of some things right now to make sure that I'm ready to get on my bicycle if I need to, or run, or whatever. But I'm not hopefully going to be in that position.
There are some concrete things that people can do. So, even some things that I'll be working on as well. To figure out more food sources that are not just going to be dependent on imports or grocery stores and the like. In terms of fostering aspects of community, more the idea of, I think it's important to have emergency readiness, whether that's in terms of, your bags packed, or knowing or having a clear idea of what, if there is an emergency, what you're not taking. Because some people like blah, 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 and they have no particular plan with it. In terms of long-term strategy, I think this cuts at the issue that we have been dealing with in this country since, since the quote unquote Emancipation Proclamation. Who are we in America? And what do we want? And I think, there's a range of choices we can talk about, yes, per leaving. But I think one key dimension of the plan, I'm on the plan, I think I told you that, I'm no longer interested in just kind of like, well, I just want my seat at the table. We have to become bold enough to say like, oh, no, we're going to hit the table. And we're going to now change the menu on what should happen. We have to kind of more assert ourselves as being dominant in this country. I mean, we could say like, well, we could leave this country to them and go to Africa, or go to, not realizing or talking about the other part of it. I'm not knocking that some part of that idea. I think, as individuals, but like en masse, that's not going to happen for a lot of different reasons. And I don't know if it should.
And let me just be very clear. When you talk about taking the table, we're not talking about subordinating anybody. We're not talking about dominating anybody. We're not talking about putting people in camps, as people have done, or genocide.
Exactly. No, we're not.
We're talking about leadership.
Leadership.
We're talking about having a plan so everybody can eat, sleep, and be safe.
But then we change the priorities of how things work, where it's not so much just about, this country, as you've talked about it, and what I just said about the GOP platform, which might also be like the platform for Democratic Party as well, but it's just light. It's really looking out for humanity. It's articulating what we have been articulating in this country from its incipience. The root thing to look at and understand with American history, any progressive moment and movement that has ever happened in the United States has been led and created by Black people, right? In terms of what we've done, the women's rights movement, what happens with Native Americans, what happens with any other people in this country, we become the leading force, the articulators for what it means to be human and advocating for humanity. So that's what we do best. And that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, facts.
Yeah,
I agree. Now,
that's really what needs to happen as the arc of our movement, in terms of not even negotiating, navigating more so what becomes important for humanity and humans, healthcare, rather than like, oh, it should be about the money. It's not working. It should be about climate, right? So that we can be sustainable and be on this planet.
So stupid. Like you fighting over things, and if anybody's experiencing weather right now, whether it's fires in California, whether it's droughts on the west, whether it's hurricanes and tornadoes on the east, flooding and massive winds and stuff, if you're experiencing in the Gulf region, Mother Nature basically telling y'all, you got this much time or else.
Well, Mother Nature could be, you could look at it that way, which I agree with mostly, but it also could be like Mother Nature, like, you know what? I think I could say it, embodying Richard Pryor and Paul Mooney. Motherfucker, I will kill you, right? That's what the earth might be saying. Like, I will kill you. I could use it by a boat. I could use it with a goat. I could use it with a pig. I could use it with an earthquake. I could kill you all these different ways. Stop playing with me. I will cut you. It's like, that
Yeah.
kind of sensibility.
Which means Mother Nature's a Black woman for sure. Okay, so do we have to see the Roe versus Wade chart, because you pretty much told us what's going to happen through this. So,
Well, we looked at. I mean, that is the Roe versus Wade.
Okay, I'm sorry.
How the wheel.
Okay.
And the Sangers. I mean, the other charts to look at, you know, are
Okay.
kind of the micro moments.
Sorry about that. Okay.
Yeah, so we can start the lesson if we have time to do the lesson.
We always have time. All right. So family, listen, follow Sam because he knows some things. Unlockastrology.com. If you want a reading, he's good at that. What we're doing in narrative are lessons that will hopefully whet the appetite of people who want to do what Sam does, which is to teach. We need more people in teaching, writing, thinking about the stars, going back to our roots, because his thing is through an Africana lens, which is important for us because we started this star thing, this stargazing on many levels, and imagining how they lined up with what's happening in the world. The three wise men being one of the first references of that, that those people looking at the stars and knowing what that meant. So get involved, sign up, join narrative. We'll see you over there on that side, and get in once you're in narrative. Let's see you in Nubia too. We're doing some things. All right. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.